Right, anyway, yeah, so a few weeks ago I mentioned I'm only going to be doing the week in the life vlogs every other week now, and then the weeks I'm not doing week in life, I'll try and film other little short videos just about general topics that I think might be helpful. And I did ask, has anyone got anything they want me to cover? And someone did reply. I can't remember their name, it's a few weeks ago now, but if you're watching, thanks for your suggestion. And the suggestion was, obviously this is a guy who's looking into doing it, and he's a bit, his question is, what do you do when you get to a collection point? Which I kind of thought, well, it's one of them ones that when you've been doing it for a while, it just, you think it's obvious. But when I think back to when I first started and the first few jobs I did, everything's all new, you're quite sort of nervous about it, you're on edge, a bit anxious almost. And then once you've done a dozen jobs, you just settle into it. But I can understand where he's coming from, so I thought I'd just go through it step by step. What I do, if anyone's got any tips, as ever, please put them below for me or anyone else who watches this. So you've got the job, you've navigated to the collection point, so you're just pulling up outside. So the first thing I do is stop the sat nav to say, don't need it, I'm there. And then I go on to pull up outside, go onto the CX app. It's good to be in this routine because that means you're less likely to forget something, forget what you're doing. So I'll pull up outside, I'll mark on the CX I'm on site. It's really important you do that because if there's waiting time, basically it starts from when you get on site, assuming you get on site sort of. If the jobs pick up within the next hour, saying you get there after half an hour, it starts then. Say the job I'm on this morning, I'm waiting time now as it happens, been here 4 hours, probably one of the longest waits I've ever had. It was pick up at 6:30. I got here at 6:20, so I started at 6:20. But the waiting time doesn't start until 6:30 because that was when the job was booked in to be collected. It's really important you do that. Before you go in, make sure you are presentable, and you've got all the safety gear and stuff on you need. For me personally, wherever it is, I always wear, steel toe cap safety shoes. I always wear my high vis on site, regardless of what the place looks like. Where I am today, this is a booze depot, big distribution company, alcohol depot, definitely need it. So I'll put my high vis on, I put my hat on or whatever. And before I go in, the question I ask myself is, who am I? And this is probably one of the hardest parts and things you're easiest tripped up out, because when you're booked on a CX to do a job for someone, you are them. So whoever they are, just to make one up, like maybe ABC Couriers booked me, I go in, I go to the gatehouse or whatever, and I say, hello, blah, 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 I'm ABC Couriers. So I always have to look at that because it can give me a bit awkward sometimes. They ask you and you're like, hang on a sec, I just need to look, you forget. So yeah, who am I? That's really important. And then you just go to the most obvious place. So where I am today is a security thing, so you're not going to get through past security, so they're the people you go to. Some sites you'll just go looking for the goods in, goods out, dispatch area. Quite often goods in and goods out at the same shutter door, but not always. Yeah, so go to the most obvious place, and then you need to get someone's attention. So yeah, just stand around the door, but there might be a door saying driver's reception or a bell. Quite often there'll be a bell on the roller shutter door by the side of it. Just go and press that and somebody will come out normally. And then you need to know the job details, so you can either do this before you go in when you're thinking who am I, or when you get there. I normally look at it as well when I'm working out who I am, but I always have the app open on the right details showing where it's going and stuff, but you've got to be careful you don't show them the agreed price on the app. Some job notes will say do not show them the app, so you'd never show them the app. I might even write it down on a post-it, so I don't have to show them the app, but don't often do that. Yeah, always read the job details, but you should have done that before you start the job really, if there's anything specific they want. So you go in, all the details, and then you just polite when somebody comes out to speak to you. Just say hello or good morning, good afternoon. I am from such and such courier, here to make a collection going to wherever it's going to. Or if it's on behalf of somebody, sometimes it'll say in the notes collecting on behalf of, so you'll mention that, who they are. But ideally there's a reference. Doesn't always happen, actually quite rarely happens, but when you got a reference it makes things a lot easier generally. Reference number. If I'm shaking it's because I'm cold. No fun this morning. And then they should bring the load out to you, or they'll tell you which bay to go to, which door. Basically follow their instructions. They'll bring the load out. Just be sure that you're getting loaded, the van's getting loaded how you want it loaded, because I've had them come out before, done like one ton pallets, and they're like, oh, we'll put it in your side door, mate, it's a heavy pallet. But on my van that means the front axle is going to be definitely overweight. Better off putting it on my van in the back doors and poking it far forward as you can with a force, get it, most of it. It's on the rear axle, most of it, but it's in front of the rear axle. So you should know your van, not just what it can carry, but your axle weights and how you kind of need to load it. Something to consider, but that's probably another video. So get them to load it how you want it. Turned up to a few jobs and they're just like, yeah, sit in a van, mate, and we'll load it. I'm never really happy with that, but some sites it's just their rules. Doesn't happen very often. And then you've got to secure the load, so make sure it's adequately strapped and stuff. Any edge protectors and stuff. Quite often I've found I've got a few like edge protectors in the van now from previous jobs I've done. I've picked up some nice ones this week. I had to break down a pallet at delivery. I had some nice cardboard edge protectors, like cardboard 90-degree angles, so you can use them. So I kept hold of them. Just be happy that the load is secure and safe for your own safety and others, and obviously if you get pulled, which I got pulled early this year, it does happen. So once you load in stuff, before they disappear, ask them if they haven't given you paperwork or mentioned paperwork. Always ask them, is there paperwork to go with it? Is there a delivery note to use with it? Maybe more specifically, because they might say, yeah, the paperwork's on the pallet, which is the paperwork for whoever it's going to, but you need something for them to sign. Always get something signed. Don't just use the CX app. I always, if they don't give me one, I've shown this before, use a generic blank one. Yeah. So this is a Pucker Pads one, which I tend to use. So if they don't give me one, I'm going to use that. But if on the job notes it says you must use customer paperwork, which it sometimes says, before you leave site you need to ring the shipper and say, they haven't given me any paperwork, I have asked, they said there isn't any, is it okay to use a generic one, blank one, Pucker Pad book? And they normally say yes, but they might say no, they should have given you paperwork, and then they'll call someone and get it sorted. Maybe whoever loaded you doesn't know about that. And then set up sat nav. So obviously you can't, obviously need to, sometimes you might not have the exact address you go into on the job details. You don't get it, you get it on the paperwork, or get it when you get to site. So yeah, sorry about that noise. That was the depot I was at finally calling me to say my load was ready. So yeah, I was at that. It took me about 5 hours, 5.25 hours to get loaded and out of there this morning. Yeah, I think that might be a new record. But anyway, where was I? Yeah, so you've asked if there's paperwork. You've setting up the sat nav. So if you haven't got the details on the job, which you do mostly, you might have got them off the paperwork or just asked them. And just make sure it's going to the right place. Sometimes on the paperwork it'll have a different delivery address to where it's going. So sometimes if it's different, I'll query it, because it's best to query it. Try and spot errors, and just look as well, is the loads, does it look like they kind of load in the job details? Just basically, if you've given a reference number or given the details and they give you the wrong load, you don't want it to come back on you for causing the issue, because then you might have to put it right at your own cost. So, and it's just best not to, to make sure the job goes as it should do, even if the error is not yours. If you spot it, you know, just better for everyone. So yeah, just look the paperwork, make sure it looks right, kind of thing. So you've set up your sat nav, ready to go. One thing about that, you're setting up your sat nav. Sometimes if you're booked on a job and it's like hurry, 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 they kind of expect you, you know, to be in a hurry. So if it's like a really urgent job, if you turn up, get loaded, and then you sat there, might look like you're just playing on your phone, checking your news feed or whatever, or messaging your mates, but you're obviously setting up the sat nav and then you're updating the CX, which is the next thing. Sometimes it's best just to leave site, just pull up round the corner, do what you need to do in terms of the sat nav and updating the CX, and then go. So it just doesn't look, you know, just looks better for the firm you're working for. So yeah, you've set up a sat nav, you know, and you need to. I normally set up my sat nav first and work out my ETA to the place I'm going. So then I can update the CX, because in that, basically, you say you're loaded, you say what you've got on board. So if it's like 2 pallets, I'll put 2 items, and then I'll put my ETA, and I'll never put it bang on. Say it's going to take 3 hours 20 minutes, I'll probably say that's going to take 3 hours 50 minutes even, on a job that length, on a drive that long. Never put in exactly what it's saying, because quite often it takes longer to get there just because of traffic. And then if you put it bang on time, it doesn't take much of a delay for you to be later on your ETA, and then you start to get to the point of, do I phone them now saying I'm going to be later? So it's best just to add a little bit on, a bit of creep room. If it's, say, an hour's journey, maybe add a quarter of an hour on. Probably add a quarter of an hour on minimum to every job. Just kind of like, if you're in London, maybe add a little bit more. If it's a straight run, then a bit less, but you kind of just work that out. So you've put in, you're loaded, how many items you got on board. Sometimes I put that in, sometimes I leave it blank. You don't have to fill it in. If it's like got hundreds of items, I'll just leave that one blank, because quite often you just don't know exactly how much you've got. If you do a parcel delivery, you turn up, they just, you know, got hundreds of parcels in the back of your van. They don't give you a manifest, you're not going to count them all. I just put bulk for that, but that comes later. And then your ETA, and sometimes I put in the description, I might write, if it's 2, I've put 2, if I put a number in, I'll put like 2 pallets or 3 pallets or whatever. It kind of depends on the job and what the load is. So you update the CX, so the shipper should then get a notification to say you're loaded. But some jobs do say call with a GOB, which is goods on board. So you call with goods on board, and then they also want to call with a POD quite often the other side of these jobs, even though they'll get a notification through the CX when you update it there as well. So obviously the paperwork I mentioned earlier, that you either get or use a generic one, that's your delivery note, which you use as a POD, your proof of delivery. So yeah, that's why you need to look at the job details for each shipper. Sometimes there's a bit of a pain, you're thinking, I've just uploaded the CX, do I really need to call? And then you call them and they're like, yeah mate, cheers, we just got the notification through. So I'd never really understand sometimes why. But then in some cases I've got, well, they'll get the CX notification, I won't bother. And then they ring you and say, oh, we haven't had a goods on board call for you, what's happening? So yeah, if it asks, it's just best to do it. And then the next thing is you leave and you crack on and you get the journey done, and then you get to the other end, and maybe that's another video if that needs a video. So either you're parked around the corner from where you picked up, then you head off, or if you managed to, you know, if you did all the updating the CX and sorting your sat nav on site, then you just crack on from there. It kind of depends on how urgent the load is and gauge it. You kind of get a gauge for these things after a while. And that is the pickup process as I see it. I'm sure everyone does it slightly different, so any tips, as I said, please put them below. Interested to know myself, but also tips for other people who are watching this. Good practice, things to watch out for. It's all good. That's why I do these videos. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, the thumbs up and all that jazz. All helps apparently. Yeah, and cheers for watching.